It's good to see you this evening. We'll start in just about Exodus chapter 3 or 4. Most of our time in 5. Go ahead and read all of the plagues for next Sunday night. I don't know exactly how far we will get, but start reading through the plagues for next Sunday night. And to correct something from last Sunday night, the land of milk and honey. Milk and honey are two food products that you do not have to do anything to, and they are wholly available to you. Like the houses, the fields, the farms, the land will be already ready to go. Those are foods that are prepared and given by God, done, and complete and whole. Already prepared abundance. Moses has objected to going before Pharaoh. Aaron has been given, and they are set to go as God has told them. And as we start tonight, everybody is where they ought to be. Everybody's right where they belong. The children of God are calling on God. Moses and Aaron are given to deliver the people. God is listening to the people. They are seeking after Him appropriately. They are praying to Him. Everybody is right where they belong in looking to God. What a powerful place. They're going to get away from this. We get away from this. But this is what we strive for, right? We're not in our promised land yet. One day we'll go to heaven, but right now we're sojourning in this land. We call after God, and He hears us, and He's going to deliver us. And there's a better day coming. That's where they are right now. That's a good spot to be in. The difference is that they don't have a story that they can look back on, like the one of Moses and Aaron coming and defeating the Pharaoh. God defeating the Pharaoh through Moses and Aaron to look at, but we do. And the appropriate response that they are going to have, what Moses and Aaron go and tell Pharaoh, is that the people of Israel need to be let go so that they can go and have a feast. And they can feast to the Lord. Of all of the things, why is this what Moses and Aaron are told to ask about? Why not? This is God. Just tell them, Pharaoh, God said let them go, period. You're not going to have us anymore. We're not going to be your slaves. We're out of here and you can't stop us. God's well within His right to do that. But what He says is, tell the Pharaoh what's appropriate. You're going to go and have a feast. You're going to come out here and worship me. I think that's more so that we can see and prepare for the feast that we will get to enjoy. Pharaoh's response is completely understandable. As someone who claims to be a god himself, the Egyptian people see him as a deity. Who is this God of yours? Who is the Lord? And again, the original language here, who is Jehovah? That I should listen to Him. That I should obey His voice and let Israel go. Why should I care what you have to say? Now, it's inconceivable that the leader of all of these people doesn't know who Jehovah is. This is their God that they cry out after, and if you are over these people, you would certainly know things about their day-to-day. You would receive reports back about who their God is. So He's not saying, please, tell me more. I'm interested in knowing. Well, tell me about this God of yours. He's challenging our God. Who do you think you are? Well, that's a dangerous place to be. The Egyptians were just about as polytheistic a people as known in the ancient world. Even to this day, and this book was written in 1972, even to this day, we're not completely sure of the number of gods which they worshipped. Most lists include somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 gods. the Egyptians considered sacred the lion, the ox, the ram, the wolf, the dog, the cat, the ibis, the vulture, the falcon, the hippopotamus, the crocodile, the cobra, the dolphin, different varieties of fish, trees, and small animals, including the frog, the scarab, locust, and other insects. In addition to these were the anthropomorphic gods, that is, men in the prime of their life, such as Amun, Atum, and Osiris. They had more than enough gods, and if they had wanted to, they could have said, well, let's bring your God in. He could be one of our gods too. Problem is, none of their gods are real. So what we have set as a stage in this chapter, we're told later, is a battle of the gods. It's going to be all of the gods of Egypt versus our God. It's a showdown, like Elijah and Mount Carmel that we discussed at the end of the lesson this morning. It's going to be yours versus ours. Let's see who wins. It's not received well. So Moses and Aaron go and they tell this to Pharaoh and say, you need to let us go where we can go and feast. And his reaction is a lot like supervisors that I feel like I've known in the past. If you've got time for that, you've got too much time on your hands. Let me give you more work to do. There's no reason that we should buy straw or pay for straw. There's no reason we should pay Egyptians to gather straw. We're going to increase your burdens. You go gather your own straw now. You go and get straw yourselves wherever you can find it. But you don't get to decrease your brick output. Well, what do you need bricks in straw for? When the straw decomposes inside the bricks, there's something about that chemical reaction that makes those bricks harder. I don't know how it works, except that's what I read. That's why they needed straw, because just mud by itself wasn't going to last or wasn't going to stack. But whenever they added the straw in, as it decomposed, it increased in hardening. And as we look back at the remnants of what's left in Egypt, we can tell that, boy, they had something figured out there. There's a lot of the things that they have built have survived. The Israelites object to this. The foremen who are over the Israelites don't understand, why is it that we have been increased in our burdens? And then they turn and blame Moses. There's a statement right here. You've made us stink in the sight of Pharaoh. You've made us stink in the sight of Pharaoh. It's peculiar. It's a little bit funny because of what's going to happen later. The burden was already so great that they were calling out to God. Remember, it's something that we discussed in our last sermon, that their burdens were so great that they were calling out to God to save them, and God remembered them and came down to deliver them. And now it's even worse than that. There's not an exact computation about how these plagues will roll out, but once they start, it's going to take about a year for all of the 10 plagues to happen in the time frame that they set. So for this year, they've got an increased burden beyond that was already a hard burden. And it just seems to Moses like he just made matters worse. Why did you even send me to the people? For since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has done evil to this people. You've not delivered your people at all. You made things worse. Showing the reasoning of man and not the reasoning of God. They don't have any longevity in their ability to suffer. They don't have any examples that they can look back on and say, this is why I need to be patient. This is what I know is going to be coming. In fact, that's all God has done so far, is promise that things will get better. It's hard to believe in a promise when things never get better. I think I've worked for that boss too. Be patient, brothers. James chapter 5 and verse 7 is written to us. You also be patient, James chapter 5 and verse 8. All of these things are an example of suffering and patience. Take the prophets who spoke by the name of the Lord. Behold, we consider those blessed who remained steadfast. We need to look at what happens with the children of Israel as patience and say, hey, it's worth it. I can hang on a little while longer. Whenever the burdens in my life get hard, and then they just get harder, I know something better is coming. Just like the Israelites, they never thought anything better was coming. After all, none of us have ever been to heaven and can come back and say, you know what? Heaven's great. And it seems like it's all just promises. That's what the children of Israel had to have felt like. It's all just promises. When are we actually going to get there? So God repeats the promise again in chapter 6 and verse 1. Now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh, for with a strong hand he will send them out. With a strong hand he will drive them out of this land. You just think that I made you stink in his sight. I'm going to make it so bad for him, for you to be around, that he is going to drive you out of this land. It's going to get worse on him than it is on you. And here's my name. There's a peculiar piece of information in chapter 6. We'll start in verse 2. God spoke to Moses and said to him, I am the Lord. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob, as God Almighty. But by my name, the Lord, I did not make myself known to them. This isn't true. As a statement, this just is not true. He called himself by his name in several passages throughout Genesis. They knew what his name was. So what is it that he's saying here? What God is telling Moses is all they've known is promise. You're going to know action. Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, they knew me as a God who said there would be a better thing coming. What you will know me as is a God who delivers. Delivers on his promises, carries out what he says. I'm not just pie in the sky. I'm going to do something. You don't even understand how great I can act. And I'm going to do it with you in your lifetime and with your people. If the promises of God are listened to, they have great power. The promised land that they're going to receive is a very thinly veiled comparison to heaven, right? It sounds wonderful. Everything's ready. Life is going to be grand. It is the promise at the end of the road. There are so many comparisons that you can draw between the promise that's given to Abraham, to the children of Israel, and to us for the promise at the end of the road, our promised land of heaven. Abraham is going to be delivered, or the promise to Abraham is going to be delivered on. And God is going to make that promise happen. Moses is going to work with that. So he tells them to be patient. He tells them to be patient, and we should take that lesson as well. Moses doubts himself again. Come on, broken record. Why do you keep playing over and over? Moses, why do you doubt yourself? This is the same reaction that Isaiah gives in Isaiah chapter 6. It's almost the same wording, but Moses says, behold, I am of uncircumcised lips. Isaiah says, woe is me, I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips. And it takes God to fix them, to make them worth something. When God fixes them and makes them worth something, then they can do his work. What are two of the things that Moses and Isaiah have in common? Nothing. They're nothing without God. The only thing that they have in common, or the thing that they would most have in common, is that God did something with them because they were willing to have something done with them. They were nothing without God, and he fixed them to do his work, to be members of his work. He empowers them. Exodus 7, starting in verse 8. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, when Pharaoh says to you, prove yourselves by working a miracle, then you shall say to Aaron, take your staff and cast it down before Pharaoh, that it may become a serpent. So Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and did just as the Lord commanded. Aaron cast down his staff before Pharaoh and his servants, and it became a serpent. Then Pharaoh summoned the wise men and sorcerers and the magicians of Egypt, also did the same by their secret arts. For each man cast down his own staff, and they became serpents. But Aaron's staff swallowed up their staffs. Still Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he would not listen to what he would not listen as the Lord had said. These magicians are formidable foes. Their names are actually saved for us in the gospel. They are Janus and Jambres, and I don't know how to pronounce it. They're not here to object to how I pronounce it, so we'll go with that. But they opposed Moses, and it's considered for them to be folly. But if you can make your staff turn into a snake, that's pretty impressive. And I've heard a lot of things about certain kind of snakes, and if you touch them just right, they turn into a stick. And I've heard a lot of things about how if they get cold, then they can straighten out and they can look like a stick. I'm just saying, who does that on a regular basis? It's Thursday. I'm going to take my snake stick. There's a lot of magic that was burned, thank God. And he did not condemn parlor tricks. He condemned sorcery and magic. And here, these guys are the best of Egypt. They're so good, they're so powerful, they can stand up and do their stuff so well that it's even written by Paul to Timothy. These guys were impressive in what they did, but that is folly. That's pretty worthless. They will not get very far, for their folly will be plain to all, as it was to those two men. What kind of folly? Well, if we can all throw down our sticks and they become snakes, then we're all kind of equal. But when my snake or my stick eats all your snakes, that means my snake's better. Because now you don't have a stick to walk home with. And the folly is apparent. God is bigger. God is better. See, this showdown wasn't just between the gods of Egypt and our God. The plagues surely must have pointed out to the Egyptians the inability of their priests to function in such a way as to turn the tide of calamity. The prayers, the counsel of all the wise men of Egypt were not capable of changing the disastrous situation in which Pharaoh and the people of Israel found themselves. The plagues served to demonstrate the impotency of Pharaoh, both as a ruler and as a god. See, it's not just about the gods of Egypt and our God. He's going to belittle, demean, put down, shove under the rug. God's going to win against their whole society. You don't stand against the people of God. You stand with them. And if you stand against them, your snake stick gets eaten. You're going to get consumed, and it's going to be evident to all, you're just playing games. This God delivers. So as there is a God that stands, little g, as there is a little God that stands in the palace and calls himself the Pharaoh, our God says, Moses, you're going to be like that in his presence. Don't worry about him being a God. Don't even listen to that noise. I'm going to make you better than that. The Lord said to Moses, see, I have made you like a god to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron shall be your prophet. He thinks he's a god? Look at what I'll do with you. What's he going to do? Call his magicians? Let him call his magicians. We'll make them all look silly. I'll make every one of them look silly. And our God does. But his heart was hardened. It's a point that I didn't explain this morning because it would have took this much more time. And I appreciate a couple of people saying, hey, you didn't say about this morning, and I appreciate that. Does Pharaoh have a choice in all of this? God said he was going to harden his heart, and after all of these plagues, he continues to harden Pharaoh's heart. Did he have a choice? The Lord said to Moses, Exodus chapter 4, verse 21, when you go back to Egypt, see that you do before Pharaoh all the miracles that I have put in your power. But I will harden his heart so that he will not let the people go. But I will harden the Pharaoh's heart. Chapter 7, verse 3. Though I multiply my signs and wonders in the land of Egypt. God has judged Pharaoh. Pharaoh loses. How soon should God take him out? How quickly should God remove him from power? How quickly should God execute his judgment on Pharaoh? He's been judged. He fails the test. God doesn't say, but I'm going to remove him from power, but I'm going to kill him. He says, but I'm going to show my power through him. Would God have been wrong to strike Pharaoh down in death for his sins? He calls himself a God, and our God's not above that. He will certainly do that in the future from this point in the story. Since the obvious answer is that God can judge anyone at any time, we shouldn't think that it improper for God to prolong the life of Pharaoh, or for God to prolong this activity that he's going to enter into so that he can prove his point. Pharaoh is going to become a tool for God to show another plague, and another plague, and another plague. In essence, what he's saying is that these miracles that I'm showing you, you throw your staff down, it become a stick. You put your hand in your cloak and it come out leprous, and put it back and it be cured. And there's one more. The blood from the Nile, you pour it out on the ground, the water from the Nile out on the ground, and it will become blood. These are all enough to prove that I am God and that I have sent you, the servant. But Pharaoh is not going to listen to anything I say or do. So I'm going to make what I have to say evident to all of the people. And he'll stay in power as Pharaoh. And God will keep throwing out plagues to prove that he is over all of the gods of Egypt. In 2 Timothy, where this is explained, and this is a hard explanation, it doesn't mean that God has created people that will be losers or be sinful and can't change. What he's saying is that he knows who's not going to change, and he can use those for his purposes as well. 2 Timothy chapter 2, starting in verse 20. Now in a great house there are not only vessels of gold and silver, but also of wood and clay, some for honorable use, some for dishonorable. Therefore, if anyone cleanses himself from what is dishonorable, he will be a vessel for honorable use, set apart as holy, useful to the master of the house, ready for every good work. You have an option. You can listen to God, or you can ignore it. And if you'll listen to God, he'll use you. He'll set you apart as holy. He will make you a chosen race, a royal priesthood. And if you don't listen to him, he'll show the whole world just how ugly sin is through your ugly, sin-stained life. What an awesome God we serve, that he can take not only the holy and the righteous and use them, but he can also use the filthy and the disgusting to show just exactly what filthy and disgusting is. Let us draw near with a true heart in full assurance of faith, with our hearts sprinkled clean from an evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure water. We started with everybody was right where they needed to be. The people were waiting for deliverance. They were calling on God. He was actively seeking to deliver them. They got a promised land coming, and now he's going to act. Let us draw near to God with a true heart, calling on the God that we know, ready to be delivered, waiting for his coming action, and be patient for it to come. It's a hard lesson to learn, We're cleansed through drawing close to Christ. We're washed with pure water in baptism. And we're cleansed to be His children. And that means that we have to wait. No discipline is enjoyable, and no amount of waiting is fun. It's not called patience because you're enjoying it. It's not. Especially when we know that there's a promised land. Read further ahead in the story. They'll make it to the promised land. They get to go in. They get to win the battles and see God's action in front of them. They're given a land that's already prepared, ready and waiting for them. What a coincidence. It's not a coincidence at all that we have a Savior that says, I'm going to prepare a place for you. What an awesome God we serve. Feels like your burdens are getting too hard to bear. They can get worse, and you can take it. You will not be tempted beyond what you're able. God's not going to give you any more than you can stand with Him. If you have a problem, let's do like the children of Israel did. Let's pray to God, knowing that we have problems and knowing that He can deliver. If you need to be cleansed with that pure water and become a child of God, knowing that there is a promised land that we can go to, then you can get there through that pure water in baptism. God heard the Israelites, and now He's fully invested with His Son as our Savior, and He will certainly hear us too.